What's up guys, welcome back to Deck Tech for Decks. I'm your host Caleb. If you guys want to support the channel, you can click on that whatnot link in the description down below. You'll get a free $15 to spend on some magic cards and you'll be supporting the channel whenever you do that. Additionally, you can become a patron. Not only is it the best way to support the channel, but additionally you'll get more say in what decks I cover. Special shout out to my high contributing patrons. Newsome, you rock. Now let's get into today's Deck Tech with Eris, and this is a very unique commander that makes some massive dragons, and those massive dragons are going to have prowess, which is extremely abusable. And we are going to do something a little bit new on this channel. Every time I post a deck list, whether it be budget or non-budget, I get the opposite camp asking for a budget version or non-budget version. So if I do a deck tech and the deck tech will reach 500 likes, I will go ahead and build the other version of the deck, since I know that the demand for the commander is there. Now let's get into what this deck is trying to do. The first thing we need to do is reduce its casting cost, which is not going to be very hard. There's a decent amount of cycle cards we can just cycle into our graveyard that have an odd amount of CMC, or they have a very high CMC. So we spend 2 mana, throw a 6-drop or 6 CMC instant and sorcery card in our graveyard, and that's going to reduce the cost. The other half of the deck is just going to be cantrippy, so it's going to be easy to get your 1 CMC in there, your 2 CMC, your 3 CMC is going to be shortly in there afterwards, and it's not going to be that hard to get this down to a 2 mana commander. And then after that, we're just going to ensure that we're trying to cast as many spells as possible on our opponent's turn. That way we can try to net upwards to 3, maybe 4 dragons a turn off of our commander's ability. From there, we're going to try to end the game with something like a Mizzix Mastery or Rod of Absorption, since that's basically going to be the Craterhoof behemoth of this deck. So if that sounds like a deck tech you want to get into, let's get into it. Let's talk about some of the cool tech we get to run in this deck. Pyretic Charge is a new card that I'm very excited to try out. This is going to be a very fun game ender, and then additionally we can plot it. So we discard our hand, we get +1 for each card we discarded, we get to draw 4 cards, so this is exactly what a Storm deck wants, especially since it does have that plot ability. Mizzix Mastery and Rod of Absorption are basically Craterhoof Behemoth in this deck. These both allow us to cast the cards that we exile, right? So we're going to storm off, then we're going to cast these, and then we're going to get a prowess trigger for either every card in our graveyard or every card exiled with Rod of Absorption. Breath of Fury is pretty busted here. It can just net us enough combat steps to end the game, and then additionally with Rihanna Fire Dancer, it will just go infinite as long as we've cast enough spells. Rihanna is also going to be a solid finisher here since we are trying to storm off, so if we cast a ton of spells, get our dragons massive, and then go to combat and create token copies that are 4/4s, that can just kind of end out the game in the right scenario. Reign of Riches is really good in this deck since it gives the first spell we cast each turn cascade as long as we used a treasure token to cast it. So now on each of our opponent's turn, all we have to do is cast a 2 CMC spell, use a treasure token to do that, and it will cascade us into one of our 1-drops. This will ensure that we can easily generate one of those dragons on each of our opponent's turn. Wand of Wonders is super solid here as well. Now we kind of want to use this on our turn just in case we exile those sorceries, but it is going to net us an easy dragon and generate a ton of value. I'm also going to shove my favorite Storm Ender in this deck because I just can't resist. Now we need Magnus the Red, Reiterate, and Electro Dominance. We need a cost reduction of at least 3 for this to work. First, we cast Electro Dominance where X equals 3, but because of that cost reduction, this is only going to cost 2 red mana. Then we can cast Reiterate for free using that Electro Dominance trigger, and you guessed it, we are going to copy Electro Dominance with Reiterate. Now from here, we can pay 3 mana to actually return Reiterate to our hand, but that's going to be free due to the reduction from Magnus. So now we get a loop where we're casting Reiterate for free using Electro Dominance, copying Electro Dominance, and we get to put Reiterate back into our hand for free. Again, looping infinite damage and infinite spell casts. We're also playing Dragon Tempest in this deck because it's going to suck the storm off, get a massive dragon, and then not be able to attack with it. It's also going to give us a little bit of spot removal whenever we attack with our massive board of dragons. Bonus round is just amazing in these storm lists, doubling up on all of your cantrips, all of your loot effects, all of your treasure generation, all of your rituals is just insanely broken when you're trying to storm off and cast a ton of spells. Moving on, let's talk about the cycling cards. These are going to be really important early game that that way we can reduce the cost of our commander. Lorien Revealed, Step Through, Frostveil Ambush, Boon of the Wishgiver are all very useful cards here. They have very high CMC, we're probably not going to hardcast them, and they're going to be solid reductions on our commander. Additionally, Step Through is going to get us our Archmage Emeritus, that way we're drawing cards whenever we're storming off. From there, you guessed it, we need cantrips, and we need a lot of them, and we need them to be at instant speed. Brainstorm, Opt, Impulse, Anticipate, Consider, Expedite, Crimson Wisps, Needle Drop, Quicken, all very good cards, especially Quicken and Born Upon the Wind. These will allow us to even play some sorcery cards on our opponent's turn. Demand Answers is going to be solid as well. Something to note with these cards that draw and discard cards, we can discard a card with a different CMC. So let's say we cast Demand Answers, discard a 3 CMC spell, that's going to reduce the cost of our commander by a total of 4 CMC. That's pretty massive in the early game. Frantic Search, Big Score, Unexpected Windfall, all very amazing cards. What these cards do is they're going to draw us into more cantrips, and they're going to give us the mana we need to cast those cantrips, ensuring that we're going to easily cast 2 spells on our opponent's turn. These are some of the best cards in the deck because additionally, we get to discard more cards into our graveyard, again, further reducing the cost of our commander. Bottlecap Blast is also very similar here. Now, this doesn't draw us into new cards, but it does get rid of one of our opponent's creatures and give us mana to cast a cantrip. So easily netting us 2 cards a turn is kind of what this deck really wants to do. Desperate Ritual, Pyretic Ritual, Seething Song, all very solid cards. They net us a ton of mana, and they're going to easily ensure that we're casting 2 cards on our opponent's turn. We have Stormkiln Artist. This is netting us mana whenever we're casting those cantrips. Archmage Emeritus is turning all of our cantrips into additional card advantage. Wave Break Hippocamp, Jorian, and Stella Lee are all going to give us card advantage when we're doing exactly what the deck wants to do, which is cast spells on our opponent's turn and do that at least twice per turn. Case of the Ransacked Lab, not only does this reduce the cost of our instant and sorcery spells, additionally it's going to give us more card advantage. Baral's Expertise is really good here because it's going to allow us to cast a spell for free from our hand. This is going to make it to where we very easily get to bounce our opponents back to the Stone Age while getting that Drake from our commander. Now let's move on to the backbone of this deck. We have Urabrask. This guy's amazing, nets us that mana whenever we cast an instant or sorcery spell. Then he flips into the Great Works, which is going to set us up for a massive storm turn. This is one of those cards you cast a couple turns before you're going to try to go for it, and this card gets you there 9 times out of 10. Thunderclap Drake, very solid, very versatile, and reduce the cost of your instant and sorcery spells. We have Smoldering Egg. This is just going to start machine gunning down all of our opponent's creatures while we're storming off. Jeska's Will. Now, it's not an instant, so we have to play it on our turn, but when we're trying to storm off and get as many prowess triggers as possible, Jeska's Will is one of the best cards in the deck. Mana Geyser kind of does the same thing. Again, only sorcery, but this can add upwards to 25 mana to your mana pool, and that's just going to give you an insane storm turn. Not to mention, it can net you infinite mana with Reiterate, as long as you cast Reiterate and Mana Geyser on the stack at the same time. Very mana intensive, but you can do it. Professional Facebreaker seemed solid here. Now, I know it doesn't really lend itself to the storm strategy, but I figured since we have a lot of big flying creatures, it's going to be very easy to trigger this 3 times a turn, netting us at least 3 treasures, and again, it can net us some solid card advantage. Seize the Spoils and Faithless Looting. Now, they're not instants, but again, really good on our turn when we're trying to storm off and get as many prowess triggers as possible. Sword of Wanton Future is going to make it easier to trigger our commander on our turn, allowing us to cast those cantrips from our graveyard. Just make sure you always maintain at least 1 card with 1 or 2 CMC in your graveyard for the commander's cost reduction ability. Irenicus's Vile Duplication. This is going to be solid to get us another copy of our commander. Getting double the Drakes sounds pretty solid to me. Windfall can refill our entire hand. Very useful in a storm list. Relentless Assault. Very good here. Getting an additional combat step in this deck can just win you the game. Great Train Heist. Now, this one's really good at any stage in the game. Maybe we need some more treasure tokens, we can get that. Maybe we need another combat step, we can get that. Maybe our creatures just need a little bit of buff, we can do that as well. Now, ideally, we want to do all of these, but even doing one of these is going to be very good in this deck. call forth the Tempest. 9 times out of 10, this is going to be a solid board wipe. Not to mention it does have Cascade, so it's going to very easily trigger our commander. Past in Flames for that insane storm turn. Now we can cast all the cards we cast already from our graveyard, and this is just going to buff our entire board state up a bunch. There's a lot of scenarios where we can end up casting all of our cantrips for free using a Stormkiln Artist or a Urabrask effect, so this is going to be very good in the deck. With that being said, that's going to bring us to the end of the video. Remember guys, if you want a budget version of this deck, 500 likes is the goal to hit. With that being said, I would like to thank my patrons, Newsome, Excessum, Chicken Salad, and Preator. You guys are amazing. You really keep the channel going. I couldn't appreciate you guys enough. With that being said, I hope this helped you in your deck building endeavors, and I will see you in the next one.